What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the pod. I'm joined by your co-host Raza Ali, of course, and myself, Wajih. It was a great week 6 of fantasy football and NFL football. Time flies, man. It's crazy. Football was pretty crazy this week. Had a lot of close games. Had not a lot of close games. A lot of teams just in the NFL space and the football space that didn't win that should have won. One of which being the 49ers that lost to the Falcons, which sucks and kind of ruined my Sunday. And I know kind of same with Reza here, Packers losing to the Jets. But yeah, how was your Sunday? How was your kind of week 6 uh, thoughts and I guess recap?
Yeah, it was pretty good. I feel like you did a good job of summing up the week. It was very underwhelming, I guess you can say, maybe for both of us,
Yeah.
mainly because of the how our teams have been playing. We've been expecting more out of them, and if you're a betting man and you looked at the stats, both of our teams were projected to destroy the teams we faced, but
Yeah.
alas, that is not the case. So just quickly jumping into what we kind of want to talk about this week, we thought it was a good idea to look over our standings and kind of just get an idea of where everything is at and what we're projecting things to be in the future. So just to quickly give you an update from last week's standings, going down in sequential order, we had Ali Zedi sitting at 1, 2 was Waji, 3 was Amar, 4 was Ali Rizvi, 5 was Daniel, 6 Abbas, 7 Sami, 8 Farhan, 9 Salik, and unfortunately 10 was yours truly. We wanted to start off this conversation because it looks like the standings have really shifted from what we saw from the last week. Just to quickly go into the 1 through 10, we got Waji sitting at number 1 now, proud. Number 2, we got Abbas, 3 at Ali Zedi, 4 with Ali Rizvi, 5 with Sami, 6 with Amar, 7 Salik, 8 yours truly, Raza, 9 Daniel, and 10 Farhan. I just want to go in quickly, immediately, just get a discussion going about this. Waji, what are you seeing on these standings, and what are your opinions so far from what we're seeing?
Yeah, man. It's a lot changed from last week's standing to this week. Complete shift of like the top four. I think a big name that I see that a lot of us it's surprising to a lot of us, and it's to see Abbas at number 2. I mean, the man has not picked up anyone from the waiver wire um, this whole time in the month and a half that football has been going on. But you know, his he drafted well, and some of the trades that he's done has it hasn't really hurt him. I think the biggest thing that stands out with Abbas's team is consistency. And like he just players give him 15 to 20 points consistently, even as quarterback, and he gets wins.
It's funny you mentioned consistency. Yeah, I totally see that. I don't see anyone on his team getting less than like 10 points, even
Yeah.
down to his defense and kicker. And it's fun you say that because the next team that I kind of want to highlight is Farhan's team, which you can almost consider the complete opposite of Abbas's. Not in a bad way necessarily, but next we have Farhan, who we're going to talk about, who's unfortunately sitting at number 10. Just to give you a statistical breakdown, he has 767 points scored, which is currently sitting at our number 10. And he's also had the most points scored on him. So he's been getting pretty unlucky in that regard. So going back to the reason I say he's the opposite of Abbas's team, I've noticed that he has a lot of really good, talented players, but he doesn't have that kind of consistency that you'd want to see with some of the people that he does have on his team. So the biggest people I
Yeah.
can give it as an example would be someone like Gabriel Davis, or I mean, not Tyreek Hill this year, but there's been a few games where Tyreek Hill really explodes, and other games where he doesn't do as well. So the volatility might be good in most aspects, but having consistency really helps in pulling out the wins, as you can see with the Abbas's team. So I mean, he's made some good trade efforts.
Yeah.
So let's see how that'll really help his team
He
improve,
should
I guess.
he should change his name to Boomer Bust. I think that's a fitting name
Yeah, that's
since
a fitting
everyone
name.
wants to change their names now.
For sure, yeah. He's his team is the one that can hit 200 points on any given week as well, which is the really scary part. Just going into the next team because I mentioned trades, the person he kind of fleeced, I guess, in my opinion. The next person on the list is Daniel. He's currently sitting at number 9. He also doesn't have the most points scored. He was actually near the top last week. He was like roughly around the middle, top 5 team. It just seems like he's been making some pretty poor decisions with his trades, especially the most recent one. I was mentioning this to Wajih earlier, like the fact that the Ravens picked up Deshaun Jackson. He's really a
Yeah.
player that's like the reason they make that trade is because they need a field stretcher, and it's probably because Bateman's injured or there's something going on behind the scenes that we really don't know about. Um, so I just feel like it doesn't really make sense. I don't know how you viewed the trade. If you wanted to quickly just like mention anything.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said it best. Like Deshaun Jackson was brought in because the team didn't feel confident about Rashad Bateman, and we've seen in the past couple of weeks Lamar's production hasn't been the greatest. I think he's in fantasy perspective, he's only dropped like maybe 17, 18 points. Um, and I think that's because defenses they don't have to play the guessing game of, oh, we're going to be burnt off the top. Lamar is just going to run. They're going to run the ball, like short passes. No one's going to take the top off the defense. So Deshaun Jackson coming in it's not like, whoa, like Deshaun Jackson is an amazing wide receiver, but it is something to worry about with Rashad Bateman, and maybe his injury is more serious than we think.
Dude, I just wanted to quickly say it's crazy to me how we're in 2022 and we're still talking about Deshaun Jackson.
Dude, crazy. What a stud, though. I
Yeah.
mean, I think another person that I would want to talk about in this ranking list is you, bro. I mean, it's you were number 10 like just last week. A couple weeks ago, you were 0 and 4, definitely getting clowned on, but
For
you just
sure.
you took the punches as they were coming. And um, a big point I want to emphasize is you're the third highest scorer in the league. And like a lot of people, like they look at your team, they're like, oh, your team is trash. You're not even above 500, blah, blah, blah. But it's just like you're scoring points, and like a lot of people are scoring points on you as well. So a lot of that bad luck in the beginning weeks has kind of worn off, and you've been scoring higher than your opponents. And I really think the future is bright for you. It'll be interesting to see like how your team like performs well in that. But in terms of kind of rankings and how we went through um, you know the change from last week to this week, I kind of wanted to talk about Ali's team. I feel like that was the biggest change, and Ali Zaidi, that is. Ali Zaidi was number 1, and now he is number 3. And his team is definitely trending down. He played me last week, and I fortunately got the win over him, but it was kind of behind a dud performance from Cortland Sutton, and of course a stud performance by Austin Eckler. But Cortland Sutton had only dropped like 4 points for him on that Monday night game, and that was just really rough. Russell Wilson not finding him at all. Although Ali Zaidi did hit on Brees Hall, and he traded for Brees Hall before, I guess, the week after he popped off. Um, so hopefully Brees Hall is like that RB1 for him rest of season. And I definitely see him being a stud for weeks to come.
Yeah, I mean, Ali's team by no means is bad. I really think he has a fairly solid team and he's made some good moves.
Yeah,
Um, he might not be scoring the most points currently, but I still do think he could be a high level playoff contender.
yeah,
Moving on to the next person we wanted to highlight from the standings so far. Um, you know, we got to mention number 1, and that's none other than our co-host right here, Wajih Kazmi. There's nothing bad I can say about his team. He seems like he has a very complete team, with some complete studs at receiver. Um, going into the season they might not have been ranked so highly, but like now that we're almost midway through the season, we have a good understanding for who the top like three receivers are, and he has two of them in Diggs and Jefferson for sure. Um, Diggs might be kind of overlooked at how well he's been doing this season. I think he's like wide receiver one right now. Um, just being on that Bills offense, he's just going insane. Like he might not be getting a lot of touchdowns, but he's getting volume and putting up yards. The other person I wanted to quickly mention on his roster that's just really performing well is Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he's been a really big helper for bringing him to that 4-2 record. I mean, he's not number one for no reason. He's putting up points. He's number one in scoring with 888 total scored points. I think he's made some really good trades this season as well. He does have some crucial buys coming up. He has both Diggs and Jefferson out this week. So,
Rough.
and he's playing yours truly. So let's see what happens. I feel like there's a good chance I can maybe squeak by a win, but let's see. The waivers are tomorrow, and maybe he can get some good pickups. Let's see what happens in that regard. Next person I wanted to highlight. He's been sitting at the bottom with me, unfortunately, but seems like things are starting to slowly improve for Salik, who's sitting at number 7. He's not scoring the most points. He's sitting at 782 total, but doesn't seem to be too much of a problem. His team is scoring points when it matters most. I really think Ayuk and Metcalf are two pretty decent players who have been helping his team out. And I just got to say, Mark Andrews, man, this guy is 27 years old and he's just going to be a stud for the next like 5 years at least.
Yeah.
I could argue, I don't know how you feel, but I could argue that he's probably one of the biggest dynasty, he's probably the biggest dynasty number one pick you should take. I don't know
Yeah.
if you
I
agree.
mean, I feel like he's just tight end is such a premium position. And there's only really like a couple guys there. So Mark Andrews is like always a lock.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I think another person that I want to talk about, especially since we're kind of talking about how many people have done so well throughout the weeks, kind of want to take a turn in terms of like duds. And there was duds everywhere on Ali Rizvi's team. I'm sorry. Like you look at his team, like 3 points, 2 points, 4 points. Like it's just he didn't even break 90 points, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely like not great production there. Even a stud like Cooper Cup for Cooper Cup standards, 16 points is kind of low. Now, granted, he does have Josh Allen that kind of kept him afloat somewhat with like 30 something points. But it wasn't a pretty sight from Ali's team.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I do still like Ali's team, like over the for the most part. I think we talked about it last week too. Man, Josh Jacobs is one of the big ones. I really think
Yeah,
his ranking for this year is a lot higher than what it was pre-draft. He's been a stud, so I feel like there's a really good chance he bounces back. He's also, dude, he's top 2 in points. So when he
yeah,
is
he's
putting on points,
definitely scoring.
he's piling them
Yeah,
on. I think Josh Allen, like this year, one thing like I wanted to mention before we move on to the last person in the standings, this year I feel like the jump from number 1 quarterback to like number 2 is like huge. So I think like
yeah,
Josh Allen is scoring. I think like the difference between QB1 and QB2 is like almost 50 to 100 points difference,
yeah. It's kind of
which is
crazy.
which is insane. That's like one or two more games played. So I feel like just having that edge this year is huge. Because I've also one other stat I saw recently. I don't know if you heard this, Wajih, but apparently last year at this point, the NFL had scored I think 100 more touchdowns than they have this year. So like
Wow.
this year's been really low scoring compared to other years, and it's crazy to see. And I don't know if you've noticed it or how you feel about that. Before we quickly go into the last one, I just wanted to
Bro, it's
see.
kind of the Denver Broncos effect, man. Like every primetime game, the Denver Broncos is on Niners, and then we saw like last night, they just like they stop offenses from scoring. And it's not just Denver Broncos, of course. I feel like the defenses are just getting better. They're getting smarter. The defensive coaches are getting smarter. The schemes are just like throwing off quarterbacks. So it's definitely hard. I think back to your point of like where Josh Allen and kind of sits, I pulled it up and he's a good like 30 points. There's a 30-point difference between him and Lamar and him and Patrick Mahomes, but a 50-point difference, almost 60 between him and Jalen Hurts. Like that's the next best quarterback.
That's crazy.
But it's wild to see that like Josh Allen is just elite.
Yeah, you know, in previous years, the difference between like 1 to 2 was more like 15 points, and then the jump from like
Yeah,
10 to 15 was like, I don't know, like I think even less than that, like 8 points. That's why like
yeah,
our guest speaker from last week, Ali, when he mentioned like, punting QBs is cool because like everyone's scoring roughly around the same. This year, it's
yeah,
not the same. It's insane. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, going on to our last but not least team, we wanted to highlight was Amar, who was
Or isn't
last
that
week.
thug?
Last week he was sitting at, I think, I want to say it was number 3 for the rankings. He's come down a little bit to number 6. Kind of on a 2-game losing streak currently. He has a very solid team. I mean, there's nothing to really complain about. He's putting up like middle of the pack points. He's in the middle of the pack in terms of the amount of points that have also been scored on him. One thing I did notice, me and Wajih both noticed, is he hasn't really been making any trades.
Yeah,
He drafted fairly well and he feels comfortable with the team he has. He's come into having a really good stud running back after Damian Harris's injury. He has Ramondre as RB1. He has a few duds as well currently based on where they were drafted, like Aaron Jones. You know,
yeah.
I'm actually curious to know, Waji, like, what do you think about the Packers running backs? Like, going into the season, people were super high on them, but like, like at this point in the season, people are kind of a lot lower and lowering their expectations. What do you think is going to happen for the rest of the season, and where do you think they are now?
I mean, from the limited time that I've watched Packers games, and you being a Packers fan, I feel like your opinion is more valued. But the offensive line just does not look good at all. Like I really do not like the offensive line. Like they're banged up, new guys coming in, and just AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones, although they're having like a very split, like 50-50 like workload. And, AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones are both getting like 12 to 15 touches per. There's just nothing coming out of it. And then Packers as a whole are not doing as good. So that means Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball more, but there's no one to throw to.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a tough situation that the Packers are in.
Yeah, I don't want to make this a Packers podcast, but I feel like this I just need to mention this one thing. They need to stop. I think they're trying too hard with this split. Oh, give Aaron Jones this much, give
Yeah,
Dylan this much. We know Aaron Jones is the more explosive player. You got to give
100%.
him like if you give Kamara 10 touches in a game, you're going to lose that game. And they're
Yeah,
giving Aaron Jones like anywhere from 10 to like maybe 15 touches, which is not enough. Like you need
yeah,
to get him the ball more. You need to get the playmakers the ball more. And the fact that they don't have playmakers in the receiving core, you should obviously be giving the ball more to your running backs. But yeah,
yeah, definitely.
that's definitely my take on it. Yeah, so that kind of breaks down our standings, where we are. I think this is looking fairly good. We mentioned earlier as well that we're expecting things to shake up as the season progresses. I really wanted to ask the question, Waji, do you think where we are currently is almost solidifying, like who's going to make it in playoffs, or you think this is still wide open and anyone can make it into playoffs and anyone can get out?
I think it's definitely wide open. Um, just, I mean, even judging to like regular NFL football, like people are 3-3, 4-2, 4-1. Like, let's be honest. Like, do we really think the New York Giants at 5-1 are contenders to make the Super Bowl? Like, if you think about it that way, then you're like, okay, there's a lot more football to be played. Honestly, a lot more injuries. Unfortunately, trade deadline is going to come up. Let's see if that affects a lot of people. Hopefully, teams in a good way. But I think the rest of the season will unfold a lot. How about you?
Um, yeah. Let me take a step back. Actually, I'm referring to our fantasy league. What do you think about our fantasy?
Yeah, so I mean, that was more so like I was relating it back to regular football, and
Oh, okay,
then
okay, I got you, I got
yeah,
you. So that's
showing
the
that like
Giants.
there's so much more, right?
Right. Okay, okay.
There's so much more time, and like if we relate it to regular football, like okay, the Giants are 5-1. Like, do we really think that they're gonna go to the Super Bowl? Versus I'm 4-2. Do you really think we're gonna go to the finals? Like, you just can't tell, and there's a
Okay, I
lot more
got you.
football to be played. Yeah,
Right. Okay, I got you. I like that comparison actually. Yeah. Um, that's a really good point. I feel like I have to agree. Like just looking at the standings, there's four teams with the same record. There's four teams that have a 3-3 record, three teams with a 2-4 record, and three teams with a 4-2 record. So it's fairly split right now. It can go any way, like you said. So it totally depends. You know, injuries is a big part of it too. It'll be interesting to see where this kind of ends up. But I definitely think I can see you making the playoffs. It'll be a matter of who the other three can kind of sneak in, just going based off
yeah.
who you have on your team.
I mean, I definitely think that like some of the bottom teams right now, including you, can definitely sneak into that number 4 spot. So let's see how it shapes out.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going late on time, so we'll just move into our last segment. Shaqtin' a Fool. Can I get a drum roll? Thank
Oh,
you. Thank you, sir. So our Shaqtin for this week is none other than the person mentioned earlier, Ali Rizvi.
ooh,
Wajih did a good job mentioning it earlier. His team didn't look too hot this week. He had some big studs like Mike Williams go for 3 total points. Cooper Cup also didn't put up the magical performance that he usually does, like Wajih highlighted earlier. Another
yeah.
player that was a pretty big surprise. Everyone was thinking Melvin Gordon would be an RB1 this week and he would have like a pretty decent
Mhm.
game, especially because of how bad the Chargers' defensive line is and they've just been bleeding points to the running back. Unfortunately, that did not come to fruition for Melvin Gordon as he only ran for 3 yards, or sorry, three
Thank you.
carries on 8 yards,
Tough.
being out touched by Latavius Murray, who was picked up off the street.
Off the streets,
Yeah,
man. God damn.
he also tried to run it back with the Taysom Hill points from last week where he scored 40, but unfortunately he did not come to give him any good points. He had a lot of people on bye as well, so it was just a really tough week. He's still sitting at top 2 in scoring, so that's pretty crazy to me. But
Yeah.
you're the Shaqtin for this week. Let's see if you can step it up next week, and hopefully things go back your way.
Yes, sir. And that concludes our week 6 to going into week 7 podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed. We will have a guest next week, so stay tuned on who that is and catch you next week. See you guys later.